The real story of America's most famous dirt bike design. Horst Leitner was a Grand Prix motocross racer, an ISDT Gold Medalist in the 1960s. Horst Leitner was born in 1942 near Salzburg in Austria. He saw America as the place where his motorcycling dreams could come true. Horst loaded up his family and moved from his home country to the United States in 1980. Living in a motorhome, Horst bet everything on his engineering background and creative mind. Horst was always experimenting, and during the R&D period of the Horst fork, he built lots of versions and none were ever the same. Motocross history is filled with examples of creative ideas that were heralded as groundbreaking. Once in America, Horst decided that the best way to develop his suspension theories was to build his own motorcycle brand. Horst's ATK motorcycles was an instant success, and it gave him the freedom to spend more time with engineering projects. Horst didn't let his parallelogram link motocross experience go to waste. He used it to build his mountain bike fork. The mountain bike industry relied on motocross designers during the early years of full suspension mountain bikes. The horizontal tube is the oil-filled damper. The coil spring is tucked up inside the fork strut. Leitner hoped to make the forks an option on his ATK motocross bikes, but it didn't happen, because after Horst sold ATK and started AMP research, he took the motocross fork and turned it into the mountain bike fork. With mountain bikes just entering the suspension era in 1990, there were no preconceived notions of what mountain bike suspension should look like. Horst's suspension ideas were a big success. Horst was inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame in 2015. Motocross history is filled with examples of creative ideas that were heralded as groundbreaking, but because of the rapid rate of change and development, sank into the swamp of forgotten technology. Although some ideas are best left abandoned, others were truly innovative, if not ultimately successful. This is the AMP research prototype. Although a few parts are missing, there is nothing major. It looks as though it has not been ridden more than 1 hour in the last 35 years. Even the original numbers are still on the front plate. After 35 years of silence, Harry Leitner got a Facebook message from an Austrian motorcycle racer named Hansen Schruff asking about a bike that Hansen made prototype for KTM. Harry recognized the bike immediately as a special project that his father Horst had built back in 1989. Although the cone pipe is a little corroded, the fiberglass fuel tank, original seat, and all the plastic remain intact. Those are even the original KTM radiator wing decals that were put on before the bike was shipped from Laguna Beach to Austria in 1990. Horst designed and built the bike because KTM's then owners wanted a bike of the future to show their engineers about the possibilities in motorcycle design. When Horst was finished building the bike, he told MXA's Jody Wiesel that MXA could ride and race bike before it was crated up and shipped to Austria. In hindsight, it was a good thing that Horst gave the bike to MXA before he gave it to KTM, because once the bike got to Austria, it was never seen again until Hansen Schruff sent these photos to Harry Leitner. Why was KTM's management going outside of their own corporation to hire an independent motorcycle designer? After all, they had a bevy of designers and engineers in their employ in Mattighofen. The new investors suspected that KTM's in-house design staff had failed to deliver stellar products in the past and didn't want to trust their sizable investment in the company to the same men who had failed to deliver for the old owners. They wanted to bring in a pro from Dover. They chose Horst Leitner as a way of showing the existing KTM designers that their jobs weren't safe. The new owners reasoned that outside competition would wake up the Austrian design team. The decision to ask Horst Leitner to design a totally new bike had more to do with bureaucratic politics than a search for creativity. KTM told Horst that he had to use as many existing KTM components as possible, and that included the forks, wheels, swing arm, brakes, ignition, and complete KTM 125 two-stroke engine. These were non-negotiable parts, but everything else was fair game. And Horst played fast and loose with the rules as laid out. When the research KTM 125 was completed, it was almost space age for the time. It was incredibly small. The frame was something that Horst called a parallax frame. It was made up of only 2 main tubes, plus the stock KTM head tube. The rear suspension was the first ever no-link, single-sided, laid-down shock motocross suspension ever designed. The silencer did not extend out the back of the This 125, but instead was routed downwards through the swing arm. The rear suspension got its rising rate from the position of the shock in relationship to the swing arm pivot and top shock mount. Ahead of its time, the Parallax Frame was the most visible part of the 125 prototype, but not the most inventive. It was feather light, extremely narrow, and like no other bike made 30 years ago. The research KTM 125 was shipped to Austria for testing in 1990. But it never really stood a chance of going into production. In the end, the AMP research prototype was rolled into a dark warehouse and disappeared forever. Back in 1989, nothing was as intimidating as an ATK 604 with electric start, the four-stroke approaching on you from behind. It sounded angry. The motocross world was all two-strokes back then, so four-strokes were looked on then as two-strokes are now in 2021. Horst sold thousands of ATK 560 and 605, with price tags ranging from $7,000 to $10,000. Owning an ATK was like owning a Mercedes-Benz. It was a status symbol. When approached by the Bombardier Corporation in 1988 to build a prototype two-stroke to replace its aging fleet of Can-Am off-road bikes, after a brief partnership with the British Armstrong firm had failed, Horst built one of the most unique off-road motorcycles of all time, the ATK 406 two-stroke. This was destined to become the new Can-Am, as the Bombardier factory didn't want to run a motorcycle assembly line in Canada anymore. Then it all came crashing down. Can-Am cancelled the deal with Horst after the prototypes were already built and elected to get out of the motorcycle business completely. The bike would stay in production for 10 years, but not on name Can-Am. It used ATK name, and it was produced in the From workshop in Laguna Beach, California, and later from a factory in Commerce, California. If Can-Am's dealer network had not elected to finance the production of the ATK 406 as a replacement for Can-Am to save their dealerships, ATK would never had the economy of scale to grow as big as it did. For a designer, making production motorcycles is the kiss of death. Horst didn't want to make 1,000 copies of one design. He wanted to make 1,000 designs with only one copy of each, so he sold ATK motorcycles to a conglomerate that moved it to Utah. As an engineer, Horst Leitner couldn't stop inventing. This was his linkage front fork on a Honda CR250. As for Horst, he changed the name of his company to AMP Research and began taking on engineering projects. He designed an easy pull clutch mechanism that not only made Harley clutches easier to pull, it also works on all other motorcycles. As America's one and only dirt bike designer, engineer and manufacturer, Horst Leitner lived the American dream, foresaw the four-stroke movement, designed watershed off-road bikes, and was so innovative that his unique and creative ideas outstripped the common vision of what a bike could be. I hope you learned a little about the history of dirt bikes. Horst Leitner played a big role in the new designs, and he is grateful for four-stroke engines in his time. He is remembered for his specific dirt bike forks, which never become popular. He used same design with bicycles, and he became famous. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. If you learned something new that you didn't know before, leave us a like, it will mean a lot to us. Also, if you have free time, on our channel you can find similar videos. If you want happiness to follow you, subscribe to this channel, and you will get 10 years of luck for free.